what do you think is the most unique thing about John?
The most unique thing about John? Probably the way he talks, just the expressions that he uses and that kind of thing. He's very witty. He's quick. One I always remember is, you can call me long for short, but you can't call me short for long.
Longevity John.
Longevity John.
You can call me long for short, but you can't call me short for long.
Oh, you used to run the garage.
Yeah. You should come take a look at our new space.
Go take a look at that.
We're going to have a full house tonight with David Gogo.
Okay.
You got room though.
Yeah.
I've probably known John for 30 years. I think the first time we worked together was my buddy Tony D was in town, and we had just kind of become friends, and I think we did something, it was at one of the community halls around here. It wasn't Yubo, but it was something like that. And we've worked together ever since, from working down in Mill Bay at the Brigantine to when he first started the, we've played furniture shops together, native cultural centers, anywhere and everywhere for 30 years.
How would you compare this venue to the original showroom?
I didn't know it was different. No, it's got that same funky feel. This one's a little less rigid, I find. It's a little more kind of lived in, a little more comfy. So that's what I like.
That's great.
She's the manager? Was she manager of Gogo, or did you just walk in?
No, that's my partner.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
The important part. If it wasn't for her, the books and a whole bunch of stuff wouldn't get done. She's the stability in my life.
I basically take tickets at the door, sell the coffee, pop popcorn.
So you're front of house?
Front of house.
And what's the capacity here?
We usually have it set for about 65 seats, which is pretty comfy, but we can do more, but also you don't want to be too full.
Yeah.
So we had 84 people here the other night for Garnet Rogers. So it was a nice full house.
Yeah. And dancing? Can you dance with that many people?
No. That's definitely a totally sit down concert.
You started off upstairs.
Yeah.
And then how long have you been downstairs?
Oh, so actually downstairs is 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, upstairs would have been probably a year and a half.
Right. So almost 4 years altogether.
Yeah,
kind of
I guess so.
Time flies. I can't believe it's been that long since I've been here. There's something going on. Maybe it was, I know, I came down for the end of the run kind of deal.
Right.
And then it wasn't an auction, but just a sale.
The sale.
On the back.
The never-ending move. The move that never ended.
I remember when he lived out Gibbons, and I went to the place because I lived down the street from him. And I went out there, and I just remember walking around, not only in the house, but outside, because all the grounds in the back, someone had been like putting all the branches together and making funky things, and the dogs running around, and then you go inside, and there's just stuff everywhere. And John actually parted with something. He let me have, it was a hummingbird. A hummingbird sort of hanging glass ornament.
Wow.
Which was very rare.
He doesn't let go of things very easily. So.
No, I was here when he let go of the accordion, squeeze box, upstairs. Well, and when he was over at the Ramada too.
Right.
We weren't the Ramada then, though. We were
the Travel Lodge, yeah.
Yeah, and he was over there, and it was great because he just took over the bar, and just all the stuff appeared. It was like, oh wow, this is awesome.
4 years ago, in 2013, in November, we had to shut the showroom down at the garage. We were thrown out on November 4th, or 3rd, I think it was. We found out, and then we did some shows and got to the end, packed everything up. But at the very last moment in that room, I left the stage because it was too hard to take out, right? And I wouldn't get it done on time. So I figured, that's part of the leasehold improvements. You can deal with it, right? But what happened was, I stood on the edge of that stage, and there was no more seats. There was no more anything left in the venue. It was empty. Minor stuff, just a box or two, right? And that's when I stood up and did a soliloquy to the showroom, you know. And as I gave all of its, somewhat of a Shakespearean feeling to it, I realized that I was in just a regular room. That this special musical room that sounded so great had not been the room. It had been what we had done to the room. That was a very reassuring fact to have happened to me, an epiphany at that moment. Because I realized then I could do it again. So when I put stuff away, right, it was with intent that I would be able to reopen again. 4 months at the Silver Bridge at the time got to be. We knew it wasn't going to work. There was a change. The guy that hired me got fired, and it was just a matter of, like, they were sucking all my ideas, and I wasn't going to be. They didn't want me in there. They didn't see a point for having me or any of what I did, right? And there's a young bunch of kids too, and certain things I was just. Anyway, it was a good parting because I don't like being in bars anyway. No one there to listen.
Where is that?
It's now called the Ramada Inn.
Okay.
But anyway, it's just the bar situation. One of the reasons that we opened up the showroom was to get away from was to separate music unto as its own entity. I know everyone says support the arts. Well, if you're going to support the arts, the money you spend on wine and beer, at these events, you could save that money and give it to the artists, who could then go buy wine and beer. No, but whatever they choose to do, possibly pay their rent, possibly pay, everyone's bitching that no one's paying. The bars aren't paying enough, and then they come to my venue and they say, well, you're making us pay to play. And I said, no, I'm charging you rent on a venue that's got a value. There's people come here to listen to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Tonight, we have David Gogo playing. David Gogo was a very loud blues virtuoso. Right? He's best heard at loud volume. We have no choice, but that's what's going to happen to us tonight, right?
Duncan's unknown jewel right here, bro.
And so what we do is at any time during the show tonight, you can hear popcorn hit the floor. No one's going to be talking. There'll be no clinking of glasses. No one's going to be talking about what happened to them yesterday. Everybody in the room, all of their attention will be on the performance on the stage, which means we get to go on a journey, which the music takes us on, not all the stuff that we do around it, right? Somehow or other, we all wanted to, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I don't wish alcoholism, I don't wish active alcoholism on anybody. I'm still an alcoholic. I'm just a non-practicing alcoholic, right?
Good for you.
And there's a whole bunch of things, about learning about yourself and all that stuff that you got to do and all that, and that's all cool. But part of that journey, and I was one of the worst guys. I remember being at a show in Fryfogel's in London, Ontario, and I just got back to town and I was all drunked up, and I was coming from the West Coast, and I was a hippie and all that shit, and there was this really good show that everybody was listening to in a full bar, and I wasn't the guy listening. And I don't know any of the repercussions of that night, except I had to live with it. I've had to live with knowing that I was the guy that fucked it up for everybody else, that I made a fool of myself. And what I try to do is save a lot of other people from having to go through that, from being the person that look at and go, oh, you're the one that fucked it. I remember the concert, you're the one that that threw up all over me, or you're the one that screamed too loud, or
when was that? What era?
It would have been in the 70s for me. But I didn't stop drinking then. No, it was in the 80s. It was the beginning. It was 1980. It was 1980 that happened, and I didn't stop drinking until 6 years later. And I used to wear the drinking as a profession. And hey, we all got to learn how we got to learn what we got to learn, right? And
before it's too late.
Before it's too late.
Yeah.
What I do note, on a positive side, is that music can do so much We're at this grand awakening right now in the universe, specifically Western world, that cannabis has a value, right? We're all astonished that it has this value, something that's always been there, but it has this value which can be used at so many levels to heal us, to keep us in a healing stage. It's almost like we were denied the one root healing agent that was possibly by, random choice, because I don't think anyone knew to the extent of how good it was. But music has done the same thing. And music, when you talk about gospel music and you talk about people getting together and joining voices, there's something physical that takes place, right? There's a joining. It's a wonderful thing. When you're in the presence of someone who has honed their skills to a line of perfection that warrants you wanting to pay for them, to subsidize what it is, because you can't do that. But you want to encourage someone to go to those areas, right? To hear, experiment, break the barriers. I don't want you to repeat. I mean, hey, Michael Jackson broke a lot of barriers, right? Mm-hmm. He went and it was always something new.
It's amazing.
Prince, always something new. Not living on the laurels, right, out of style. And that to me, that sort of allows me to like all sorts of aspects of music. Oh, Stevie Wonder's been, played a very important part in how music was played, presented, the topics that were brought up.
And he started off as kind of, your 50s kind of guy, and just moved into all these different experimental
once
things.
Fame got to him, or once fame arrived for him, and once there was dollar value or an opportunity to be acknowledged for you, then you start finding people opening up doors saying, hey, what can you do? How far can you go? What doors are you willing to open, right? And he stood his ground, and he was able to do that, and he had the people behind him along the way that were able to also have that vision. And that's a hard thing. I'm not too sure where that era is these days. There's a lot of people out there. Like, there's some very good local music. Nickelback, nothing's great about them. It's pretty formative, but they're doing well. And to a lot of people, they're heroes, right? To a lot of people, they sell out. I don't care what you say, but they sell out all the time. So now, that has something to say about the sheep, what the sheep are willing to accept, or what the people have been given as the status quo, so they'll accept that. And you know what? Some of that status quo is good. Every so often, we had a band here a couple of weeks ago. Never hardly do this, and it was a cover band. I realized that every song stood on its own. They stood out from every other song that I hear on a regular basis. Do I ever hear I have a young band that came through that's got a song that I went, if they can continue this, they may have the ability to garner an audience larger than, because the rules have changed now, right?
How have they changed?
When we had Duncan Has Talent this year, we had the original category, which is for people singing original tunes or instrumentals. And 3 of the kids that were doing the original tunes, we asked them individually, so they weren't expecting the question. Who do you look up to? Like, who inspired you? Who got you? Who's your fave? Right? Who's the one that does it for you? Right? And they all mentioned a famous person, and they all mentioned someone that they found on the internet that was real. Right?
Yeah, that's
I got a 13-year-old who was in here hip-hopping last night. Right? Putting down the put down. Right? Like, he's already saying, hey, look, you know, he's 13 years old. And he says, I'm sick and tired of hearing this shit. Like, who's putting, like, what? You know, like, just be real. Just be put. So the internet is wonderful in that, you know, we wouldn't have Justin Bieber. We wouldn't have a whole bunch of those things that are, say what you will, say what you might, but the guy's on stage, right? You want to do that job? You want to go out there every night in front of thousands of people and produce, right? Every night, the same moves, right? And these aren't common moves. These are things that you had to work at. It's not like, I'm just going to go out and be myself. No, you got to work. Yeah. I mean, that's a hard job that he took up, put into, right? And he seems to be able to, you know.
He was able to translate it to.
And, you know, so he has a little bit of trouble growing up. Well, shit, wouldn't anybody thrust into that? But, you know, is that the only one with all this, you know, the talent shows and all that? We didn't want, with Duncan Has Talent, we changed it from something to being highlighting who's in town. We're just trying to find out who's got some skills and how could we mentor them to improve their skills. Each and every year that we do this, from the opening night when you hear that performer to the closing night, if they make it to the finals, they've improved their game. Why? Because each time it's every year during the 39 days of July, which is this other wonderful little event that we created, which is an offspring of what the Duncan Showroom is all about. So I question myself all the time, which is something going on right now, somewhat due to illness, which creates a depression, which creates a you know, and with the, you know, a non-practicing alcoholic, you're constantly checking yourself and making sure that, you know, you're in your parameters.
How did you get to that place? Is that just something that was innate for you, or did you have somebody that was helping you to understand that, or do you just have to be really in tune with what's happening with your mind?
I'm a very fortunate person that at an early age, in my particular case, I was given the opportunity to play with magic. I don't know what the magic is. It doesn't come from me. I didn't generate it. My mother acknowledged in her lifetime that it wasn't from her, but it had passed through her to me. Right. So what it is, I have no. How
did it manifest itself?
How does it manifest itself?
When you were young, how did you discover that? What was the feeling, the vibe you got?
Boy, am I ever lucky that, you know, how did this happen or how did that happen, right?
You just serendipitous stuff?
But well,
or how would you describe that?
Because I don't always look like I'm not looking for the. I guess if I applied it to money, if I applied it to something else, it might work, but I don't. Right? So it's about what buzzes for me. Maybe this is from. See, I think that it existed. I saw a glimpse of it the other night. I remember when I first helped out with something and got a glimpse of, oh, that was really neat, putting something together, right? Right. And how I got a little bit involved and went, wow, this is really cool. I'd like to do that. And, you know, I was one of those kids who probably did way too much acid when he was younger. And maybe, you know, I could blame it on the drugs, but I don't think it was the drugs. I think it was just the makeup of the, you know. I was one of those, in the 50s, there was mid-50s, they found a bunch of people in Ontario in different communities, and they took a bunch of us as 8-year-olds and put us into grade 3 and grade 4 in 1 year, 10 to a classroom. I met someone else who was in that situation too, right? And they have attention deficit disorder. It took them years to find out what it was and how to identify it and how to work with it, right? And then I wonder if that was a commonality amongst all of us that were picked, right? Because we had this innate ability to be able to, our IQs were good, or that we could learn things real fast, but we have a disability, and the disability is attention to, you know, can you tie your shoes, right? Great guitar player, but can they tie their shoes, right? Great technician, but can they tie their shoes?
So how did they find you guys?
I don't know, but there was 8 in our class, and that year I got the second highest mark of the grade 4s. Like I was right up there.
It was at your school, or did you have to go to a different
I know,
school?
I was in my school, in this little town, Smith Falls, and I had this happened in Ottawa as well. But the thing that, I mean, so here I am wondering about the studying, what they did. I'm also wondering why there's a mass hepatitis C outbreak in Canada, when we were all given inoculations at the year in our, with needles that didn't have, they just were dipped, and every so often sharpened and then dipped in alcohol and then put in, like maybe, or was it the carrier that we were getting with all that vaccine?
What they put in with it? Like
the carrier, right?
Yeah.
Did they not know? So that's what created this whole thing called liver disease, which they're going to be able to cure, but they created it, right? And no one's going to take blame for it, because the amount of money that it's just, it's just, get used to it. That's the way it is.
So is that's manifesting now with you, or?
Well, I've got Hep C, and I found out a bunch of other people did. But what it started making me see is the overall picture again. Like I keep on looking at, because I try and justify. I never took up a lifestyle like anybody else, mostly. Like, I have the ability to possibly have a better life than the one I've chosen, right? Financially, if I had chosen to go that direction, but I can't find. I don't have there's a work ethic, or there's something in there, or I'm not exactly. It's not a work ethic. It's because when committed to something, I give it 20%. We just make it happen, right? There's no one I know that. Just that I choose projects that no one else is willing to choose, which I do believe. Again, that music is a healing agent by giving these kids a chance to explore. It's something I never had the ability to do. So
that's another question I had, because I want you're not actually a musician.
No, I'm not a practicing musician.
Did you know musicians when you were growing up? Because a lot of people would have the house parties and stuff.
No. The only thing matter of fact, I was absent in my life. The only thing that I got was that my mother was an Elvis Presley fan, and she took me to see Elvis Presley when I was 7 years old. I got to be late. Go to bed late one night so I could go see Love Me Tender at the theater on a Wednesday night, right?
As you went to the
so my mother was like 16 when she had me, 16 and a half, 17. So like at 7 years old, she was only 24. Where were you when you were 24?
Well, actually, I had my first baby at 17 years old.
Yeah. So
and I had 6 kids, so yeah,
So you understand.
Oh, I totally get it.
But in this time period, it wasn't something that was happening much, right?
Yeah. No, I get it. It just so happens.
And also, in my little town, it was like, whoa. It sort of put us off on that side.
Yeah.
So
was she
attractive?
But she wasn't married. I'm assuming.
Well, she was, but it didn't work.
So she got married because she was pregnant?
No, they got pregnant so they could get married.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Child of love.
Yep. That's.
But it didn't. But in that saying, so that brings us. That's all the other, the part of the culture that brings a person up to who they are today, right? Yeah. I don't know where the sense of community comes from, although that it was the community that saved me from. I don't like being drunk. I don't like waking up with hangovers. I don't like that fruitlessness. And I have to sometimes be careful that I don't let my mind go back into those places. The stinking thinking that goes with it.
Is that what it is? It's the thought pattern. I mean, my partner just died of alcoholism in March, only 60 years old, and I had a hard time understanding what's the deal, what's the draw, But I mean, it's complex. But it's just like,
it's complex. Whatever makes you decide you want to do it. There was a moment when I had to decide that I was willing to give up, that I had reached a bottom, and I found that, and I did it, and I started walking the walk. I may not be the epitome of the AA program, but what I am is someone who's managed to maintain sobriety for 31 and a half years.
You made a choice. You decided.
I made a choice.
So was there something in your life that was more important than the alcohol?
Well, I had to be careful that I thought, what happens if I sober up and my wife leaves me still? He said, well, it's not why you're sobering up for yourself. And that was the soul searching that I had to do, is that let's be truthful with yourself, and I have a mission. I've had enough people in my lifetime take me aside and give me acknowledgement of what my capabilities could be, that there's something that are special, that I'm not aware of what it is, right? And I don't want to really know an awful lot about it, right? I'm willing to say, okay.
But you're doing that for other people. I mean, it seems like that's in your.
Well, if I can help out, I mean, I like to be liked, you know. It's probably some kind of dysfunctionality that takes place, right? And I'm sufficing some kind of form of dysfunctionality, but in the process, someone's winning from it. But I also, and so I argue with that all the day, but inside all that, there's this pureness where I realize that, hi dear, how you doing? That the direct line of what it is we're trying to do, what's trying to be done here. Right? Rob McKenzie is a very good artist. He designed our logo. No, the very seductive eye of the muse. If you take a look, you'll see the eye, the seductiveness of the eyelash. Then you'll see the eye underneath, and then you realize that the muse is actually the music. So that was done with.
And who did this?
This is Rob McKenzie, and then the guy who did the steel work is Travis Rankin in town, right? Who had the machine to do that, who offered to do that. Now, so what it does is it brings. Rob McKenzie has a sense of class, right? There's a sense of quality he brings to his work. There's a sense of quality I bring to what I do. There's a sense of quality that everybody brings to what they do. I'm liable to find those people and bring them in. When we had a sound, like I started up the showroom. Glenn McIntosh helped me for a while, and then he left, and then he came back again, and he worked with Harry Manx, and I got him turned on to working with Harry Manx, and gave him a job for 9 years. But he liked what we were doing, and he always spoke highly of it because he knew what we were trying to do, right? And that is, I would. A venue where people listen. We have an amazing amount of songwriters, talented songwriters, right, that are pouring their hearts out. And anyone who can tell a story in 3.5 minutes, right, and walk you from one end to the other and then have redemption at the end, they redeem the whole walkthrough. You go, wow, this is cool. This is an art form. And some people are really good at it. Bruce Coburn, right? Those aren't words that, Dan Hill was just here. Talking with Dan Hill, like, what? You have the same kind of life I did. You had to say, like, how do you write about it? And I have those same feelings. How can I identify? Like, how do you walk the words in? Oh, because you work it, right? Or whatever.
Did he have an answer for that?
No, these are questions I ask.
Yeah,
right? But I ask him personally, or
you didn't actually.
No, we talk. John Hadfield, who hangs with him quite extensively, and they grew up together. He's also a writer, and we talk openly about writing and what its purposes are, and how does anyone actually do that. And I have one of those things again that I have the ability to write the way I talk. If I sit down and write, you'll know that it's me that wrote it. You can hear me saying it, nice. And that's a fine art. But I can't do it any other way. Like, I haven't gone to there and then we've gone ahead. I've just started here and made that popular, right? Same as this. Like, what's this all about? It's just something to do, right? I have that ability. I have the ability to walk in a room and be noticed, right? I can't hide well.
Well, you got the tallness factor too.
Tallness factor. Even sitting down in a room.
What are you, 6'4"?
6'6".
6'6".
Yeah, on a good day. So, but I can sit in a corner and you can't see my height or anything else, or hide behind a beard, and all you can still get, people will still know that I'm in the room.
So is that part of the deal? Is that you want to be not so much noticed when you walk in a room? I think
that's been part of my life.
Yeah.
I think that the pressure that goes with performing, the pressure that goes with being on the money.
Tall.
Well, being on the money, because a lot of my life I was hungover, right? So I couldn't really. I was always in a.
When did you become 6'6"? Like, at what age did you reach that height?
I went into grade 9. I went into grade 8, 5'9.5". I went into grade 9, and then in grade 10 I went in 6'10", 6'4.5".
Wow!
It just grew right over summer.
Yeah,
So
so that took a lot. Yeah, so how did that, I mean, I'm always curious about how that affects, because mostly men, you know, like I've got 6 foot tall nieces, and I know how it affects them, but it wasn't like that Zoom thing.
At a time, there weren't many boys that were tall. I was one of those, you know, there was a whole bunch of things that made me stand out anyway, right? Because of my height, because of this, because of that.
Okay, so what's this and that? I'm curious about the this and that.
You know, I had large feet. I had big ears. I was tall, right?
Okay, I'm just curious because I've got a friend that's 6'8", tall Terry on Salt Spring. And I hadn't thought about this before. I've known him for years and years, and he said when he lived in Ontario, he couldn't skate, and he couldn't because he was born in 47, and they just didn't have a variety of sizes. Oh. And I just, because he's very careful about his shoes. Like when he finds shoes he loves, he's very, you know, he like, as I've got really normal sized feet, and he said, you know, I just can't do that.
I take a size 15 and a half.
And he's 15. And so when you were growing up, did you have the same thing where you were limited about being able to
I had to send away, skating, a whole bunch of things were denied of me just because of my size. Shirts that actually reached my wrist. Shirts I could tuck in. Pants that reached the ground. The same size 32, 34 leg now fits me and reaches the ground. It never did. It never did when I was growing up. A 36 barely reached your ankle.
Wow.
You know, there were no, I couldn't now, I can go into a ton of shoe stores and find 15s, 16s, and 17s. They're everywhere.
Yeah, all of a sudden you got the big boys, and it's a normal thing. I just found that really fascinating because I never thought about that. Those are the sort of things, the personal things about people's lives that they sometimes don't, you know, they don't want to talk about because you're awkward enough when you're a teenager and you've got all this other stuff. So, do you think that had any?
No, there's not a question about it. I mean, growing up as a teenager has an effect on everybody. That's just the way it is, whether it's good or bad. My big question would be, I've noticed that there's never been any, there's always people, you know, groups to get together for people who've got problems dealing with their complexities and their problems, right? You know, people that have a dysfunction here or a dysfunction there. What about the person that happens to have good looks or happens to be okay, right? What about those people that were popular during grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, or grade 10, right?
They'll get theirs.
Yeah, but like, no one told them, like, I had a friend of mine, and this, I mean, we're way off course on this, but these are observations, right? No, these are all observations, which will help you understand. My attempt to be as open-minded all the time, but also be a leader in where you have to go, right?
That's a fine balance.
It's a fine balance. Benevolent dictatorship. It's difficult. Now, not to lose the thought I just had there. I may have.
Your friend.
God. Yeah, but what about him? Which friend?
We were talking about people who are good-looking and people who don't know that they don't have a support group.
Well, we'll just keep on going.
People support group.
Did you get something to eat there, bud?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, not good. Good. There's a lot of anecdotes that add up to where the human condition is at any one given time. Like everybody from Montreal, I wanted to come out west.
So you're in Montreal?
For my teenage years.
Okay. So was that with your family, or did you go in
with my family?
Yeah.
And then not with my family. So that was an interesting... I had a father, a real father, not my stepfather, but a real father who lived on the wrong side of the law. I don't know much about him, but you know, I didn't want to not glorify him. I didn't glorify him. I didn't want to be that. I was innocent, naive. I got away with a lot. There's always been angels overlooking me. Right? There's many times anybody else would have, and I'm always aware of that I have not lived a life of hardship. I have pain. I've lived, you know, compared to a lot of people, yeah, it might be hardship, but I have not lived a life of hardship, you know. I saw a post on Facebook today of a guy whose dad would never, his grandfather said, my grandfather would never come He would come up, he would come to the table, have something to eat, and he'd start crying, weeping during the meal, and then he'd leave. And he'd go back down to the basement. She says, it was only last year that I found out that my father had been in this war, and had been in these trenches, right, for the time period, and the only place that he felt safe was being underneath the stairwell. And that he couldn't get upstairs to see his grandkids. Because it was just too overwhelming, that he had been shell-shocked for that period of time, right? How much are we going to blame on everybody else, on everything else? I mean, I'm from a timeline where people got, you know, you had your problems, you lived up to it, or you didn't, right? Or you jumped, or you're not. But there's so many things now that we, at times I see hope, but at times I see despair. I saw some children today who have no concept of what a barrier is, and that's a problem, right? Because they have no respect for someone else's property. Can you teach that? No, it's now inbred in him in such a way that. And then I know another child that gets to go watch the computer all the time, his cartoons, right? He lives at 4 years old, he lives in those cartoons. Oh, God. When we were kids, get outside. I don't want to see you till the street lights come on. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Since World War II, when the Germans had been so successful at manipulating people, you know, in their experimentations in mind control, more than anybody else.
Sure, they just brought it over
so
here.
So they bought it all afterwards.
Yeah.
They waited till they could get what they wanted and then bought them over here. So we're living in a world where we're being assaulted constantly. I was aware of that at an early age, and I decided not to be a part of it.
So what made you aware of that, do you think?
The French Revolution. I did a quick paper on that, and that showed me a bunch of things. The double standardness of life.
So when you were growing up, was your mom a single mom, or you said you
I was a single mom till I was 10.
Yeah, so it sounds like it might have been a bit of a struggle.
No, because I lived with my grandparents as well. We shared a house with my grandparents.
Okay.
So I never really wanted for naught, right? I may have been lonely a little bit, but not, like I never saw any hardship. There was no real hardship. I ate, everything was fine.
Did you ever have siblings?
Not till I was older, my mom had a new family. And then 6 years into the relationship, it became apparent that my stepfather and I weren't going to get along. Because I was 16 and I wanted to break loose, and he was trying to put a hold on me. And when I came back I remember coming back when I was, would have been 23, and I drove into the yard, and there was my two brothers, 8 and 9, or 10 or something in the front yard. And I had to see who ran up to me, so I could figure out who my brothers were, of the 5 or 6 kids that were playing. And both of their hair was longer than mine was when I got thrown out of the house. And to his dying day, I never was given a key to the house. He was doing his very best at what he thought was the situation. He loved this woman, and I came with it, and he was willing to accept that. And I don't hold anything begrudging to him. He did the best job he could. I got out on my own. It meant that my mom and I didn't really have, we had a closeness like nobody else because we had to do it from a distance, right? We stayed in touch quite well in our distance. She went nuts. I'm glad I wasn't around when she did, because I would have been very troubled.
What do you think that was all about?
Menopausal, and the fact that she didn't know how to decipher who it was that was talking to her. She had someone, outside forces, the spirits, she didn't know how to decipher them. She had no one to talk to. She had no one. in her scope of life that could have talked to her. The reason I noticed, I ran into a lady at some point who had the same problem as my mother did and had no one to talk to. And the generation that I was in, it was allowing her to at least finally talk to someone about it, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas my mother wouldn't have had anyone other than her mother to maybe... My mother read tea leaves. Mm. My grandmother lived on intuition.
Right, so they have the magic, they just didn't know.
You know, they didn't know, they had been never trained in it, but my mother not having the ability to have anyone to talk to about it, right, would have confused her. And at a time when the minister was sexually, hi guy, were sexually molesting parishioners, young kids, right? And Mom had Mom had more of an understanding of the world than she was allowed to have. She was kept at home. He didn't know what, you know. There was a whole bunch of things that I would have let my mom had a more freer spirit, right? But it wasn't the way it was meant to be, you know. And the life I have is the life I live. We're in a quandary right now whether or not we stay open, right? Because it's just such a harsh financial thing. It's hard on me to keep my energy up to say that I can do this. But the reason, when you see what happens, when you see the magic moments happen with the music, it's like, fuck. It's like, why else do you do it? Every night I sit here and go, this is why. There's some reason at the end of the night that says this is why I do it, whether it's a full house or a non-full house. Right?
How many nights a week are you doing this?
We try to do it 7 nights a week, but
that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's your everyday.
Well, it's not that we do it 7 nights a week. It's that if there's someone who wants to play, why are you going to tell them no?
Do you ever take time off to do something, like if you were to take time off, what would you be doing?
Trying to raise money to pay for the venue, which I can't afford to have because it costs too much money, so we have to be open 7 nights a week, because $20 in the till is better than no dollars in the till.
The old entrepreneurial spirit kicks in.
When you see light at the end of the tunnel, order more tunnel.
Yeah, it's. I think it's something that people don't understand. What drives that? When did you first notice that you had that kind of spirit?
I noticed that I'm a survivor. I noticed that somewhere along the line I would adapt real quick to the situation that was in front of me and figure out how to make it work. I could walk in a room and not feel comfortable, but by the end of the time I was there, I would have made my impression and done what I had to do. One of my slight claim to fame for me is Dan Aykroyd's dad, who was doing that series on psychic abilities or on paranormal, right? I ran into him at Dan's wife's 40th surprise birthday party. I was down the road, so I ended up at the party, wandering through the wood with my nose flute, and I got a chance to talk to Dan's dad. And he acknowledged, without a doubt, that there was something that I had.
So
right?
You knew him before?
No.
You didn't? Okay.
No. So, I mean, these people show up in my life to let me know that, you know, they see something that I can't see.
Yeah.
And I don't want to stop and take a look because I don't want to take the time. It allows me to be in awe every day. I don't want to ever lose that. Right? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you, I don't want a perfect day every day. I want to have to look for the perfection in every day.
I like what you're saying. I think that's really so important. People are, it sounds like you're able to be in the moment a lot more than a lot of folks, they're sort of yesterday, tomorrow.
Being in the moment is a very wonderful place to be, but being in the moment separates you from everybody else because no one else is in the moment. So your peer pressure, your peer group is very little. When it does happen, it's really nice.
So you're saying you're I just wanted to go back to that idea of being in awe, finding the things every day?
Finding things every day that make each day a special day. At the end of the day, it's going, well, fuck, this is great, or if there's something, well, I'll always turn around and find something that, I got 4 dogs left, but I got 13. I had 13, but I got 4 left. Well, that means 9 are dead, right? I got another one that's going to have to go soon, right? I'm going to have to pick that day soon, or not. We've had see, I'm just dealing with that right now. How am I going to deal with that? Because I have a different belief. People like me could get thrown away. I mean, they could put you on the 4th floor real quick if you didn't watch it because you don't follow the rules, right? And I knew it would come to this, that it would be very easy to hunt out those that don't follow the rules. But that's okay. I've got enough going for me that I can't disappear easy, right? There better be some reason.
So you're kind of doing the opposite to what you were doing before because you're trying to disappear somewhat. Now you're trying not to disappear.
But then it so happened that in all this disappearing, right, and just being the guy who I was, one-on-one, I created a lot of people who know about me across the country because I travel across the country a lot, and Drew Nelson went across the country with me once. He said, I can't believe how many people you know. Everywhere we go, you know somebody. I did a lot of driving across the country with vehicles that should never have made it, drove vehicles with trip permits across the country, just drove it. Why? No one in the car, or just me, and just testing it, man. Like going across the country in 65 hours. What the fuck? That doesn't give you any time for sleep. Like you're sitting in Saskatchewan, you're trying to figure out which ferry you're going to catch. Come on. But there's something about when you get to that place and you're just in that zone and you're there and your mind is clear. And for me, it was a serendipitous, just me, clear thoughts. And sometimes they weren't, but sometimes you could. You could find that little zone where you could just coast and just know that the world was all right at that moment. And that's all that counted, right, was that moment. Yeah. They could fuck up in 5 minutes, but believe it won't. And there are times when I should never have gotten those vehicles across the country. There are, I wouldn't want to go back and acknowledge too many of them for fear that I would be abusing the power that was given me. Or not the power, it's not a power. I would offend the people who overlook me, or who look over me. No, I stopped watching movies. I don't watch many movies, and I don't read books anymore. I don't.
Is that a conscious choice, or you just don't have time?
It became a conscious choice, and now I have no time. I liked it. I love going in, but I'm always afraid that the information I put inside is being put in there by someone else, and that if all thought truths are those in a real world. Truths are those things which you experience. All else is hearsay. And if you can accept that as such, that's fine. It's very easy for me to think that maybe they went to the moon. It's very easy for me to think now that maybe they didn't go to the moon. That's why I do it. The Duncan Showroom starting the far side of 8 p.m. sharp one more time. Thank you very much for bearing with us, ladies and gentlemen. We just got a new shipment in of, yes, earplugs. Why? Because David likes to play with volume. And some people, you can still hear it, but if you do need them, don't feel like you're left out in left field. We do have some over there at the counter, free of charge, by the way. And tonight, just to let you know, Everyone like my Fred Astaire's? I just love the Fred Astaire's. But you have to be a certain age to understand what Fred Astaire's are. We're going to be doing 2 sets tonight. That way we can allow you to have the availability to, in fact, step up to the merchandise table and procure as much as you need before the evening's out, because you know how fast it will all go. As a matter of fact, did you wear your T-shirt tonight, my dear?
It's in the wash.
Don't tell me why it's in the wash, whatever you do, please. She actually wore it inside out the first night so she could be real close to David. Isn't that great? Wow, true fan all the way through. Anyway, his name's David Gogo. He's here to rock us out. Give him a warm welcome.
Crossing the border. so much. Good night.